Well, fellas, let's get right into it. Arsenal, they're, I don't know, 10th place, mid-table team right now. I think we always talked about Arsenal as the big four. Dare I say it, before Neil's Chelsea was alive, they might even got into the big three. And now, are they still part of the big six? You first, Rocky. Go ahead.
At this current point in time, I would say that they're nowhere near the top six on the footballing pitch, which I like to always focus on. Historically, they are absolutely in the top six. But there's been a demise at the football club that all and sundry have been able to identify. And I'll tell you what, lads, I feel rather saddened by the spiraling down of this great club. I remember as a kid going as a travelling substitute. That's when they had one substitute, and if he got sick, then you'd be the substitute.
Really? That's only like...
That's it. That was the way it was.
13th man.
13th man. Exactly.
But I don't understand. Wait a minute. I don't understand. So you're telling me there's only two guys that would travel with the starting 11?
Yeah.
Two extra players, yeah.
Two extra players. But one of those trips that I went to was Arsenal, and Malcolm McDonald was still playing for us at that time.
Great player, Highbury,
ex-Arsenal legend,
and went on to Arsenal, exactly.
Oh, he went on to Arsenal. Yeah.
Yes, and I remember Mal coming up to us because I was just goggle-eyed at this club when I went in. The marble, the flipping marble. This was like walking into the glory of Rome, Charlie.
Yeah, Highbury. That was Highbury. Yeah.
Exactly, at Highbury. And he said, Mal says, is someplace this in it, Rock? I says, I cannot believe it. I was just, my eyes were like Marty Feldman's. That's what he says, take your shoes off. I says, what do you mean? He says, take your shoes off. I took my shoes off. I'd follow Mal through the fire. This was a head.
Clearly, he told you take your shoes off, and you're on a parking lot filled with glass and rocks.
No. This is when we're in the dressing room.
I got it. Okay.
We went in the dressing room, and I took me on, and I went, bloody hell, it's warm. And what it was this underheated system that was taken from you lads had built Rome. That's the extent of how magnificent Highbury was. And they had the heritage, Neil, to live up to that. Not just the marble and all of that, but it was the history that they built onwards and upwards. And when we'll get into it with Wenger and the great success. But prior to Wenger, this club was a historic club.
It was. Were they rich, Neil? Were they a rich club?
Yeah,
too?
But they were the poshest club in England.
Right.
Their directors had double-barreled surnames.
Yes.
They came from the most expensive school. We call them public schools in the UK.
Which I never figured out, by the way.
Yeah, by the way, and you're right. They're private schools, obviously, and it was the poshest club. If you go back in time, Arsenal was always an important club. In the 1930s, they became only the second club ever to win 3 consecutive titles, league titles. But after that, it
were you a Chelsea fan at that time?
Oh, I was already a Chelsea pensioner, Charlie.
Okay.
But after the 30s, they only won a couple of leagues and a couple of FA Cups before 1970-71, when they won the League and Cup double, just the second team in the 20th century, 10 years after Tottenham, to win the League and Cup double. And then again, they didn't win a lot after that for the next 15 years. And in 1986 was a big change because they made as their manager someone who had played in that 1971 team, George Graham. And George Graham basically turned them into serial winners. 1987, the League Cup. 1989, champions. 1991, champions. 1993, the first team ever to win both the FA Cup and the League Cup in the same year. 1994, European Cup Winners' Cup. when it was a big,
Sure.
a big trophy.
Big deal.
But then there were issues. There were issues of bungs, and he had to leave.
What's a
So
bung?
for our
Hey,
listeners out there, you
yeah,
need to
right.
say a bung was a kickback, basically, that a
The agent
manager was
paid.
not well paid in those days, and that's how they'd make a little bit of extra money. And
Yeah.
they was exposed on that show in the BBC Panorama, whatever it was, years later. But
Yeah,
basically,
yeah,
a manager would say to a guy, "Okay, I'll take the player," and the club
But-
would pay whatever $10 for the guy, and the guy would give $2. The agent would give $2 back to the manager.
But
Simple
Charlie,
terms.
as young boys, we had a different meaning for bung, but we won't go into that.
No, we won't go into that. By the way, it's
But
the same meaning here in the States, but there's only one meaning for it here in the States. We don't we call it a bribe. Okay, we don't call it a bung.
The important thing about this era is it wasn't pretty to watch football. It was direct football, the offside game, and they were known as 1-0 to the Arsenal. It was the chant that all the fans sang.
But that's what I want to ask
give-
Rocky.
give them
Rocky,
some-
you grew up in this time. You were watching these guys across town, as you said, across the country. As you said, you're come from Newcastle, Coal Town. I think working class is probably the most realistic term we can use for it.
Absolutely.
And here you go to this, as you said, this beautiful Taj Mahal of a stadium, Highbury.
Right.
And what kind of manager was Graham?
George, great. Well, this is into the 80s now, so I'm over here in the
Now
States.
you're here already.
Yeah.
Well, start in the 70s then. What kind of team was it in the 70s?
Yeah, the Bertie
It
Mees
was
era as well that I can recall, and that era around the 60s and 70s, Arsenal was still one of the teams that everybody revered. It was in the Manchester United class. Am I wrong, Neil?
Well, they were underachievers.
Right. Oh, yeah.
And
they weren't as successful.
They had that 70-71 season. That's my point. And then all of a sudden, 86 to 95, when George Graham left, they won a lot. They had a year of a Scottish manager called Bruce Rioch. And then in 1996, they brought in Arsene Wenger. And the whole point of explaining that the George Graham way of football was not necessarily entertaining, although it was, because it was winning and every fan loves a winning side. Arsene Wenger reinvented not just Arsenal football, but Premier League football when he arrived. And very quickly, the trophies started coming with beautiful football. And in his first full season, he won the League and Cup double. And from 1998 to 2005, they were always in the top two. He won the League and Cup double again in 2002. They were the Invincibles unbeaten in 2004. And in 2006, of course, they got to the Champions League final.
Okay,
But
so
by
what's
then-
happened the past decade? I could tell you that my beloved AC Milan the past decade, what happened? They sold, they were a recipe. It should be a case study in business school. How do you destroy a club? And look, I love AC Milan, and I think they have the right people there now. But it was Berlusconi selling players to make financial fair play work. The exact opposite. At Arsenal, had all the money. They complained they couldn't spend the money because they were going to build a stadium. Then they built a magnificent stadium, one of the first, new stadiums in England. And they did, they raked in the money, and they had money to burn, if you will. They brought in the Kroenke Group, which is,
that was a
wait
little
hang on
bit
a second.
late.
One of the wealthiest families on the planet, right? They had their issue with what was his name? The other
Usmanov.
yeah. That's it, exactly.
Well,
So
let's just explain how they got to that. Because what happened, Charlie, was they decided to move stadium in 2004. And they did it very quickly. And they moved in 2006. But in 2005...
I was going to say, though, Neil, I mean, you've got to put a subplot here with the reason they were able to move into the new stadium had a great deal, in my opinion, with the magnificence of what Arsene Wenger was able to do.
Yeah.
On the footballing side, the sales that he engineered with getting these, I would say, almost obscure, and I'm being polite, obscure names that he brought to Arsenal and were able to sell on for a huge profits. That really did aid and abet the whole move to the Emirates.
But it also killed the team, Rocky. In 2005, just listen to this. In 2005, as they were trying to fund it, they sold Patrick Vieira, their captain and arguably their best player, to Juventus.
A necessity, no? A necessity, though, no?
They moved in 2006 and the same summer sold Ashley Cole to rivals Chelsea. In 2007, they sold Thierry Henry to Barcelona. In 2008,
but hang on, Neil. Wasn't that Arsene Wenger maybe being more clever than they should have been? Because he did have some, as Ray says, some successful guys, and he tried to sell these guys when, in his mind, this is my opinion, he thought they had maybe 1 year left. So he was going to get a lot of money for them. Yes, it would hurt for a year, but he'd move on and he'd buy other players with this money.
But I also think that the culture of the club had gone from let's win things to let's just stay in the Champions League and keep the money coming in.
Well, look, I think he was in it for 17 straight years or maybe more. Pete could probably correct me. You could probably correct me, Neil. But, I mean, the money.
What
hang
also
on a second,
changed?
just to give an effect, Neil, just to sort of give it an understanding that the more times you're in the Champions League, the higher your coefficient is in the European Club Association, if you will, in UEFA. The more times you're in the Champions League consistently, you end up with money. Every year it's between 30 and 70 million dollars, let's say, right? And that's money your rivals don't get. And that's why it's so incredibly impressive to be in that stratosphere. Now, if you're a fan, what Giorgio and I always used to say, the great late Giorgio Canaglia used to say, as a fan, I don't really give a damn if they make money or they do this. I do care if they do make money, that they should spend it on players.
Well, what happened around this time as well was that the culture of the Premier League changed, because in 2003, Roman Abramovich bought Chelsea, and the investment into that club was far greater than Arsenal could manage. So David Dein, who was the brains behind Arsenal, he became the vice chairman in 1983. He ran the football. He did the transfers. He worked with George Graham. He worked with Arsene Wenger.
By the way, he did everything. When you went
he was essential.
Yeah. When you walked into Highbury in those days, before this whole thing happened and haven't been there, I have a completely different view of Highbury because, I'm used to American hospitality by this point, which food isn't great, but the boxes are fancy and stuff. And you walked into Arsenal, and I remember that they still had those metal trays with the heating under, the water being heated up underneath. And it was like nowhere near. The first club to really change all that was Chelsea, in their boardroom with their directors. But it is an interesting point, because Highbury at this point had lost its luster, right?
Yeah,
and it wasn't the marble Taj Mahal that Rocky walked into as a kid, No,
but David Dein, recognizing all this, Charlie, wanted to bring in money like Chelsea had brought in Abramovich. And he was behind Alisher Usmanov, the Ukrainian, coming in. Now, in 2007, Usmanov bought nearly 15% of Arsenal shares. But the rest of the Arsenal board didn't want him. They felt threatened by him, and they wanted Stan Kroenke, who became available, because he would hold off Usmanov. Now, in the same year, he bought, or his company bought, nearly 10% of the shares. And from 2007 until 2 years ago, those two were at war over who controlled Arsenal.
And didn't I was going to ask you, I mean, there seemed to be a lot of movement at this time against sort of Eastern Europeans owning the clubs. Uh, Roman Abramovich, an exception, of course, right? And later the Middle Easterners, all energy money, if you will, gas, oil, et cetera, including Russia, okay, including your beloved club, right? So, but there was a movement, if I remember at that time. Liverpool had a couple suitors in the early 2000s that they didn't know, they would prefer American owners, is what they always said, because they understand sports. That was the word on the street. I'm not saying that's what the Liverpool hierarchy said, but you're telling me in Arsenal's case, it was very true that they wanted Stan Kroenke because he was an American sports owner versus Usmanov, who is a Ukrainian.
But when you say they wanted, Charlie, who are you? Who are you?
People that own the shares. The people that own the shares.
And the board.
Yeah.
And the higher echelons of the board.
Now, let me just say, in that regard, so the board are the ones who wants to change track for extra money coming into the club. Right. So and you've got players that were brought in, particularly responsible in this import was Dean. And listen to these names, like Patrick Vieira, Emmanuel Petit, Mark Overmars, Thierry Henry, Davas Suka, Robert Pires, Sol Campbell, and on and on, Cesc Fabregas, Robin van Persie. Now, this was around a time, Neil, in 2007 when Dean said there was irreconcilable differences between himself and this rest of this board that wants
because they didn't want to invest anymore.
Okay, hold on. Can we get back to the football for just a second?
Please.
In that time, in 2006, Arsenal beat Real Madrid at the Santiago Bernabeu, and no other football club from England had ever done that. So my point is, Neil, they were riding such a beautiful wave of success on the football pitch, but it wasn't enough. It didn't seem to be enough. Why would that? Why? You tell me, Charlie. At that time.
Well, look, I think it's the intrigue of the board politics. I think that David Dean backed the wrong horse. I think that David Dean wanted Usmanov because Usmanov would let David Dean run the club.
And Usmanov would finance purchases.
Okay. Perfectly said. And the difference is they got a very, very capable and I would say fiscally conservative guy in Ivan Gazidis to watch Stan Kroenke's money.
Okay. Chief executive at Milan.
And now he's the chief executive at AC Milan. But look, his job, Ivan Gazidis' job was, the stadium, get the most money out of it, get to right the ship financially, if you will. Stan Kroenke bought the whole club. You need to understand that too.
It took him 9 years, about 9 years, but yes, he did.
He did. So he bought the whole club. So this
how did
club
he do
became,
it? How did he do it? One
he
by one,
bought out the other shareholders.
Buying the peoples out and giving them a fortune from those double-barrel names that you were talking about.
Yeah.
Many of them, out with the old, in with the new.
But after the sale of Thierry Henry in 2007, just listen to this. And remember, they're not selling to nobody. They're selling to rivals. 2008, Alexander Hleb to Barcelona. 2009, Emmanuel Adebayor and Kolo Touré, both to Manchester City. 2011, Cesc Fabregas to Barcelona. Samir Nasri and Gael Clichy to Manchester City. 2012, Robin van Persie to Manchester United. 2014, Bakary Sagna to Manchester City. Captain Thomas Vermaelen to Barcelona. And after that, they had no players left to sell. They didn't do another big sale after that.
Okay. And it's taken us full circle to where we are now.
Yeah.
Okay. And I agree.
Well, not quite, Charlie, because in 2013, they started buying. And in 2013, to be fair, before 2013, in 2012, Usmanov wrote an open letter complaining that there wasn't any investment going on and that Kroenke was killing the club. Kroenke, meanwhile, continued to buy out all the other shares, and in the end, bought out Usmanov as well. But in 2013, they started spending money. But did they spend it well? 42 million on Ozil, which broke their transfer record of 15 million. I mean, it was they'd fallen so far behind. So suddenly 42 million on Ozil. The following year, 38 on Sanchez. The following 2 years later, 40 million on Xhaka, 37 million on Mustafi, and they sold Gnabry for 4.5 million. I mean, now we're talking the football decisions that are being made.
Right.
Well, this is important. This is important. Okay. First, Rocky, I won't get into this too much, but just because I know you and I like these things, to wrap it up. In the rule is in England, if you want to buy, you can force a purchase if you have 70%. So Osmanov always had 30%, right? And so then they had to buy out all the other guys first. Then they bought out Osmanov.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it's the other way around, Charlie. 29.9% you need. 30%.
30% you need. I said that.
30. Yeah. So yeah.
Okay. I said you need 30%. So that's what.
And then you must offer for a takeover.
Then you must offer a takeover. Okay. And then it comes into the valuation and all that stuff. But the question is, with all this money every year getting into the Champions League, okay, bad purchases, but let's not forget, by now David Dein had gone. Okay. David Dein was gone. And really important to remember, everyone says the man in charge of this club was Arsene Wenger. He made all the decisions. And so, I think this man is a genius. I think he's done incredible things for the game in England, as you said, Neil.
Yeah.
But then it became, you need to be, even heroes have flaws, right? So you need to be a little critical.
His philosophy stood still.
And the question I had is, okay, I'll ask Rocky about the game, if his game changed in accordance with him. But even more importantly, he was also now the general manager. He was the guy buying players, where before it was David Dein with the Patrick Vieiras of the world and the Henrys of the world when he bought these guys. Now it's Arsene Wenger selling these guys and buying other guys. I mean, to me, that's the big, big difference. And again, I have enormous respect for Arsene Wenger, but there isn't anybody at Arsenal, anybody historically is going to tell you that there was other people making football decisions the past 10 years. It was Arsene Wenger. Right. So for my question is a simple one. I wanted to go to Ray. What happened to the beautiful football that set the EPL alight?
Well, it got diluted down without anybody, with the right person. And I tell you what, when just recently when Unai Emery came in, you would have looked at him and thought, with his tremendous resume in the Spanish league with two great clubs, and then going on to success in Europe as well, that he would have had the opportunity to continue in Wenger's footsteps. I thought he would, Charlie. I mean, I hold my hand up. It didn't.
I thought he'd be successful too.
Yeah.
I really did. One could argue he almost won a Europa Cup, Neil, against your lot, as they say. But, the Europa Cup's a funny business.
Because I don't think so.
It's not like the UEFA Cup. Hang on a second. Yeah. It's not like the old UEFA Cup where you could get anybody, okay? What the Europa Cup now is, it's really haves against the have-nots. Mm-hmm. Because, the haves is such an advantage over two legs, these big clubs like Arsenal's of the world. I mean, for Chelsea, it's nothing for them to win the Europa Cup. Am I wrong, Neil? No, I'm not wrong, am I?
No, you're Seriously. Right. But what I do think is that the one way in which Arsene Wenger changed is he changed from producing the most beautiful football, and people say he never built a defense. He didn't know how to defend. This is nonsense. He inherited a great defense with icons of Arsenal: Tony Adams, Steve
That's right.
Bold,
Yep.
David O'Leary, Martin Keown. But he built a new defence, which was the invincible defence, with Jens Lehmann in goal, and with Sol Campbell and Kolo Touré at centre back, and Laurent, the Ivorian, and Ashley Cole at full back. And he built a huge side. Robert Pires on the left wing was 6'1", 6'2". The midfielders, Patrick Vieira and Gilberto Silva, were 6'3" and 6'1". This was a massive side. But after that, he went to a very small side, and they got pushed around. They got bullied. But what he did do, he kept the team in the top four while selling their best player every year until 2016.
Right.
Now, if you're talking about Unai Emery, he was in charge of Valencia when they went bust in the mid-noughties, and every year they sold their best player. Albiol, David Villa, David Silva, Juan Mata. Every year they sold their best player, and every year he got them to fourth and back in the Champions League. That's why Arsenal hired him. That's why Arsenal hired him. But they got rid of all those players. They were no good anymore. And it was too late. And that's why it didn't succeed. So I didn't expect it to succeed. I want to go to 2016 and Wenger's biggest mistake. Because in 2016, he'd had a couple of good years out of Alexis Sanchez. And he signed Danny Welbeck.
Great years out of Alexis Sanchez.
Yeah.
He was one of the best players in the league. Come on.
He signed Danny Welbeck from Manchester United. Right. In 2016, France got to the finals of the European Championships. And coming back late from that summer was Olivier Giroud, who had been centre forward for Arsenal for 4 years. He just scored the most goals he'd ever scored in a season to get them back in the Champions League. But when he came back that year, Wenger made the decision not to use him at centre forward anymore. And he chose Welbeck or Sanchez ahead of him. And for the first year, Arsenal didn't qualify for the Champions League. They came fifth. And they have not qualified for the Champions League since. Now, I think Giroud...
Tactics or players?
Both. I don't
you go
think
first,
Sanchez,
Neil, then Ray.
I don't think Sanchez is a great centre forward. Right. And I don't think Welbeck has been fit since he was about 18. Giroud understands the Premier League and the Champions League.
But what I don't understand is you hear it not just with Arsene Wenger, but virtually almost every manager that's ever managed a game. Sir Alex is one of the exceptions, right? That, you know, we can point to so many managers that were great for a short period of time or even a lengthy period of time, but then they hang around too long, if you will. And they say, I'm going to manage again. I mean, Benitez is a great example. Here's a guy that everyone coveted, everyone loved, won trophies, great things. I can't say anything but good things. And now it's like, heck, do I want to go out and get Benitez to be my manager? I don't think so, right?
Get Steve Bruce.
Yeah, okay. But the point you have is, I mean, the point I'm trying to make is you're dealing with one of the richest clubs in the world. They want to succeed, obviously. And we already know that their goal is top four. They're not there anymore. They're really in danger of falling out of Europa Cup now, as teams like Wolves and Sheffield United and I mean, it goes on and on, you know, guys that are and
Leicester, obviously.
Yeah, sure. So, you know, sort of coming full circle. Let's go to this team now. Okay, we went to the great days. You know, they're outside of the top six really since Wenger got there for the first time, and they brought in
George Graham got there.
Okay, they brought in. Good point, Neil. They brought in Arteta. Okay, here's a guy with, I think, universally recognized as a wonderful player and a manager of the future. You know, everyone loves the guy, right? Worked under the great Pep Guardiola. You can't say anything but good things there. But he is an untested guy in a big pool here suddenly. You know what I mean? This is a big pond, as they say. And so I'm trying to get my arms around, okay, Unai Emery didn't work, but he wasn't a big manager, right? Ray, I mean, he wasn't a guy that everyone coveted, Unai Emery. I mean, like, okay, he was good, but he wasn't,
His teams played some smashing football, though, Charlie. I mean, you look at the coach. He was a tremendous coach.
But let me ask you this. Years ago, you know who called me? I helped him get a job at Chelsea. I can say that because he said it in his book, Carlo Ancelotti. Then when Carlo was looking for work before they hired Unai Emery, and they said very respectfully to me, we'll let you know, but at the moment he's not on our radar. So I'm letting you know now that I know for a fact that this was a job that almost any manager in the world would have coveted, including Carlo Ancelotti, and he wasn't on their radar.
He wanted it. Yeah, he wanted it.
Yeah. And so that's I mean, this is really a serious issue here. Okay, you don't get Carlo, you get Unai Emery. It doesn't work out. So now you go even further into the untested, because I agree with you. Unai Emery did some amazing things for what he had, right?
Right.
So now you go even further into untested instead of going the other way, because I could give you guys a list today of every manager in the world that would take the Arsenal job. An amazing stadium, amazing finances, amazing everything, and they go to a young guy who's untested, and now they've suddenly, where are they? Where are they going?
I mean, did you at the time, Neil, when Arteta was picked, because he's certainly inexperienced. He didn't assume the mantle of being awe-inspiring, even though he was handpicked by Guardiola, as you said earlier, Charlie. So you'd think that given the time, he would be able to produce a better brand of football. But look at what he's inherited. Look at the types of players that he's got. And then, Neil, you have to look at the structure of this club that led them to this point. And this is where the people come in that you look at as architects. They had a man called Sven Mislintat that was at Dortmund. And he evidently was the man who had this vision for Arsenal's rebuild through a youth system and much more complex than that. But being involved with a method of scouting the players that needed to be brought in to resurrect the structure after Wenger, and to be more in tune. But that didn't happen. And the model was Dortmund, and that was the part that they expected to be followed along, and it didn't. It hasn't worked out. And you look at the Sanllehi's involvement with the club, and this conflict.
Right. Because Sanllehi. He's a dear friend. He's a great guy, and I can never.
Okay, so
Raul Sanllehi. Excuse me.
So the conflict was in continuum in this situation, and it seems to have continued right through the coaching ranks. The coaches, by everything that you read, love the club, love the build, but under this cronky pyramid, everybody that's involved, it doesn't lead to a process that you can further the club with. And that's why these people are starting to basically walk away, turn their back, and say that they can't conform to this. And I think it's going to take an awful lot over the next few years, few seasons, to get this back on track. Either they're going to trust in Arteta along with these people under Kroenke, or hey, I don't see them returning to the good old days. And it's Francis Cagiao. Am I saying that right, Charlie? Francis Cagiao, who brought in Martinelli, and that part of it looked as if that was going to start to stimulate the club. but there seems to be a disconnect between these people. And I said to Phil Shane, probably Arsenal's biggest supporter at the time, when he was one of the people that wanted him out, he's come to the end of his days. And it goes back when Wenger says, when Dean walked away, it's one of the saddest days in the club's history. From that point on, it has just unraveled.
All right, well, let's talk about the current players, okay? They re-signed Luis for a year, David Luis for a year. They re-signed Mauri. Who's the other kid, Neil?
Well, he was on loan, Marley,
yeah, well, they
and
signed
Cedric
Mauri
Suarez
permanently
on loan, and they've made them both permanent transfers.
Okay, there you go.
I mean,
now
look at that in itself, though.
They're
mean,
all
the
defenders,
extensions-
Rocky. They're all
not good
defenders.
ones. They're not good. They're not great ones, though. That's my point. They aren't. But that's the whole situation that Arsenal find themselves in. They don't have any other alternative but to sign these players. You look at Mesut Ozil on that type of money. They're stuck with him, Charlie.
Yeah, but he doesn't get in the top 20 now. He's not even brought with them on the trips.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. The mess is absolutely so deep and so wide at this club now. And it's spilling over onto the pitch now. And we've seen it in the last few games where they have been trying to play some pretty football, but it's been pitiful.
Look, let's stay up top.
All right.
Aubameyang has been great for them.
He has, worried, Charlie, but let's not forget.
They're going to lose him. I'm just saying, right?
Yeah,
they spent 70 million on Pepe. They spent I don't know how many million on Lacazette. And are these guys good enough?
Well, this is the point. They spent 47 million, which was a new club record on Lacazette in the summer of 17. And they were so disappointed with him that in January 18, they spent 57 million on Aubameyang. Now, initially, he played centre forward in place of Lacazette. Now he tends to play on the wing, which is where he spent a lot of time at Dortmund. Pepe's been mostly a disaster so far. And suddenly, Arsenal's future looks to be the kids. And Ketia, who had a very good International Champions Cup last summer. Oh, God, what's his name? Saka, the left-sided player. Well, he can play midfield, he can play left back, he can play either flank as an attacker. He's a terrific youngster. And they have got, I think Martinelli looks a really good player, but he's got a bad injury.
I do too. You bring up good points. So they got a couple midfielders that are pretty good.
But how did they get here, Charlie? That's the whole thing. How did these players get them? And it comes back to the structure of the behind the scenes. You know, behind the scenes, this player was picked up by Kagigao, and this guy deserves the opportunity to have more of an influence in the club, but it doesn't look like he is. And it seems to be this whole Shakespearean play that's taking place behind.
Think of the influence that Barcelona has. I want to point this out because, you know, we went through the lineage, if you will, of who was picking players, etc. Now, Raul Sanlé, who is from Barcelona, he was the Nike representative for Barcelona.
Right.
He became the player guy at Barcelona. But make no mistake about it, they have a completely different structure at Barcelona. They have La Masia, they had Cheeky Bergestein, they had Ferran Soriano, they had presidents. And he fit there perfectly, did a good job with Barcelona. Now he comes to Arsenal.
Right.
And he's the one making all the decisions now. And now I can tell you this, I had dinner one night with the young Kroenke, the son of the owner. What a gentleman.
This is Charlie's dog. And Charlie's dog is a Tottenham supporter and is really unhappy with us discussing Arsenal.
He may be a Newcastle supporter because he's black and white, or he may be a Juventus supporter. I don't know. But here, okay, he's gone now, so we can cut this part out or keep it in, whatever you want, Pete. But here's what I say to you. That was the male person. She came, and Bean hates her. I don't know. He thinks she steals things from us. I try to explain she gives things to us. but he's not happy about it. So sorry about that, fellas. So look, so Raul Sanlé is now in charge of the recruitment. And
Right.
when he had Arsene Wenger, even though it was for a year or two, at least the two of them could now talk. So now, where do they get Arteta from? They got Arteta because he has the influence of Pep Guardiola, who to Raul Sanlé is the greatest manager, has to be the greatest manager that's ever lived, right? It's the Barcelona way. So that's what he thinks he's going to get with Arteta, right? And so now we're sort of coming, this is I don't think a lot of people think about this, but this is an underlying influence.
Of
You know,
course,
careful
big
if you
time.
want to be like Barcelona, because Barcelona's a special place, good and bad, right? And, you know, I'm not sure that Arsenal's Barcelona, you know, and this is a real tricky situation, because now you're talking about two of the three guys they spend big money on, Lacazette and Pepe, are question marks. The third guy is a guy that they may lose, okay, in Aubameyang. And now what do you do with as you said, you keep buying defenders. So this team, and I said, I met with Josh Kroenke, could not be a finer person. His father and him support this club magnificently. Honestly, I'm not just saying that because I had never met him. I had met Stan Kroenke a couple of times, but I don't want to pretend I'm friendly. I had a couple of breakfasts with him, actually. Very impressive people. And when I tell you this, they want to give 100% support to this club. And what was admitted at dinner that you could say is that, you know, it's a new era, because Arsene Wenger, even when Kroenke owned the club, ran everything, you know, on the football side. So now you've got to restructure things. And
Right.
And, you know,
That's it. That's
to me,
the key.
if I got to restructure things, honestly, I really love Arteta. Don't get me wrong, you know, but if I'm going to restructure things, I'm going to get a seasoned guy to come in and say, okay, let's work together with this seasoned guy, and let's make sure that we start picking the right players. And I don't know where we are. David Luiz, do we want him? Do we not? You know, are these young guys going to come good that they have? Some yes, some no. What are you going to do with Ozil? I mean, that's the first thing you got to figure out.
No, there's nobody going to touch him. There's nobody going to be touch him with a barge pole at the money that he's on. They are literally stuck with him. I mean, it's you look at his ability has faded as well, Charlie. It looks as if his appetite isn't quite as driving as what it was when I remember him in his Real Madrid days, where he was absolutely spectacular. But he's another one of those players that doesn't seem to fit the mindset of what Arteta is trying to bring in. I mean, there seems to be fault lines all over the club.
Well, that's right. You're hitting on the head. It's more than one little mistake, right?
Really,
I'm quite
and I'm
worried.
not saying that I'm blaming anybody, because some of these things just occur by, you know, inertia, if you will, right?
Is it the right people that's brought in? You know, Edu gets brought in, another man who's, you know, has a wonderful slew of contacts, but it doesn't seem that they're working hand in hand. Given the recent
Rookie.
walkouts,
Edu's agent is Kia Jurabchayam. David Luiz's agent.
There you go.
David Luiz's agent is Kia Jurabchayam. I'm
There
looking
you
at
go.
Arsenal now, and they've become one of these clubs that are linking into one specific agent. Unai Emery's agent was Kia Jurabchayam.
By the way, it didn't hurt Chelsea when they tapped into George Mendes either. So
No, but they were tapped into Pini.
The key is to get the right guy.
But they were tapped into Pini Zahavi at the same time, Charlie.
Yeah. That's
And there were
true.
two or three
That's
agents. I'm just worried that Arsenal are tapped into one now. I really want to play devil's advocate here. I hope Mikel Arteta does well. I don't wish Arsenal harm beyond, you know, not
Normal,
doing as well
good,
as Michael.
competitive spirit.
Yeah.
Right.
But this idea that Charlie, your idea of the British media and the British attitude that because somebody has done a job or is at a club, they are the best in the world. which is marketed and promoted all the time, is something that is sadly very anti-British and utterly correct. It just
Well, I will take
happens
that as a compliment.
all the time. It happens all the
No,
time.
it
and
happens all the time. Is right.
It drives
He's the
me up
best.
the friggin' wall. There
He's
is
the best
no,
now because he's there. They're the best
there is
because
no
they're there.
evidence whatsoever that Mikel Arteta will make a good coach. Just none.
None. I know.
He's been number 2 to Pep Guardiola. You know, a lot of people were number 2 to Jose Mourinho. Very few of them have become good coaches.
And I would say
hope
Sir
he
Alex
does.
Ferguson too.
Yeah. I hope, and a lot of them were brilliant number 2s,
Right.
Carlos Queiroz, and they weren't brilliant number 1s.
Right.
I really worry that Mikel Arteta may not be the right guy for the job right now.
Well, how do they fix it now, guys? Because
It-
look, are they gonna? Let's ask a simple question. If they end up in 12th place, 10th place, whatever it is, which I hope they don't, but if they do, now they're not even in the Europa Cup, right? And so, or you could even say, great, they get into the Europa Cup. I don't think they're going to get into the Champions League, okay? So they get into the Europa Cup. All right, how are you going to hang on to Aubameyang? How are you going to hang on? How are you going to get other players to come in?
Again, Charlie, you look at the structure above who are going to be bringing in. Arsenal still, if this bad season and this spiral down that we've seen since Wenger has left, it's always seems to be have been teetering on a bit of a decline, and now it's actually caught fire. When you look at the involvements of the hierarchy and the lack of adjustments that they have made, both in extending these recent contracts, extending the contracts of players to a massive extent, it didn't look as if they deserved the crippling wages now that's been bestowed upon them. Those people have got to be taken into account.
Yeah, and Rocky.
Yep.
Let Aaron Ramsey go on a free transfer,
There you
running
go.
Alexis Sanchez's contract down till they had to swap him for
Perfect.
Henrik Mkhitaryan. I mean, it was
Perfectly said.
bizarre.
It is a disaster. So how do you fix it, Charlie? It's a massive reoperation and a readjustment, bordering on a total reboot. And the people that are in position to do that under evidently a fine gentleman in Stan Kroenke with a lot of money as well. His
And a lot of sports experience, let's be honest.
Exactly.
But has he got
And
trophies?
no, he hasn't got the trophies yet. Okay,
Well, but he's saying at Arsenal.
we're
But
talking
the
about-
Rams have won.
No,
different-
anywhere.
Yeah, they've won. He
So
said
that
teams
doesn't
have
make
won.
they don't make him a loser or anything, Neil. I
No,
mean,
but
the fact,
Fenway keep coming up with the trophies, and now they've done it at Liverpool.
Yes,
Right.
they have.
right? I mean, that's the counterpoint to it. But there can only be one winner. There's only people, they don't grow on trees. That look at every club in the world at the highest level, and they can't continually win season after season. But this whole Arsenal Football Club now is in. There's some seriously hard decisions that have got to be made, Charlie, and you know more than Neil and I by far the type of people that's going to be needed to come in and do what Arsenal did. Come with a revolution, because they're bordering on needing that, Charlie. This isn't just a readjustment that's going to be choreographed by even an Ancelotti that comes in.
And I'm not suggesting he would have done that. I'm saying
I don't think he would touch it with a barge pole.
Well, look,
No.
he took Everton, and he feels good about their future.
Yeah, but look at the structure that he's operating with, and he's got a big part to play in that, hasn't he?
Yeah, he has a huge part to play in it.
Big say in
and
it
he's
as
learned
well.
some mistakes from the past. At Bayern, he stuck to his guys and didn't really want help from and some of these guys are his relatives, including his son. But now he's at the club. He's accepted Ferguson as his number 2, and he thinks he's just a great number 2. He's learned from some of his mistakes he's made at Bayern or Real Madrid, places like this. And I think that at Everton, they are going to improve. Now, they have money. Look, let's be clear about this. I'm sure there's some listeners out there saying, well, what about your AC Milan, Charlie? The difference is this. They stopped spending money 10 years ago, okay? Yeah, and because they had no money, they brought in untested managers. Trust me, if they had money, it would be very, very different. This is what's so staggering to me, because this club is wealthy, well-run commercially, one of the big clubs on the planet, because it is what it is in the Premier League and its prominent position there over the years. And at some point, you have to say, wait a minute, are we doing it right or are we doing it wrong? Now, look,
I think we need to just stress how extreme their problem is. There are only 6 clubs in the Premier League as we speak who have won fewer games than them this season. Brighton, Watford, West Ham, Bournemouth, Villa, Norwich. I mean, we are talking the relegation battle clubs. They're the only ones who have won fewer games than Arsenal. Now, I think Arsenal are in a more extreme position than Manchester United were in at their lowest point post Sir Alex. But I think they've got to go down the same route that Manchester United went down. And the first thing they've got to do is probably sort out their defence. Goalkeeper, centre-backs. Have they got, buy a goalkeeper if maybe they want to stick with Leno. I don't think he's top draw. They need 2 centre-backs. Mustafi, they spent nearly 40 million pounds on Mustafi. He's awful.
If the goalkeeper's not right and the defenders aren't right, that's a lot of money you got to spend.
Yeah, but that's what Manchester United did last summer. Now, Manchester United are fighting tooth and nail just to get in the Champions League. Arsenal probably need 2 generations of buying. One to get them back to competing for 5th, 6th, 7th, and then another one to grow from there into second,
I think
third,
it's
fourth.
3 years that they have to invest to get it back where it is. So, look, they have the money. Charlie. The reason why I say 3 years, Neil, is they have the money, okay?
And they spend it.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is not a poor club. It's a well-run club commercially. They're not going to go under tomorrow, okay? And they're not one of the clubs that are in danger after pandemic of going out of business. My point is that the Premier League has become, the most competitive league in the world. And I would say it's competitive in its money, okay? Because everyone has money now. So an Everton, which Rodney and Tommy and you guys routinely laugh about when I say financial fair play kills a club like Everton because they can't possibly make enough money to invest, even though their owner's wealthy. Well, maybe they figured it out. We have some young players. Let's build them. Let's build a new stadium. Let's build around this manager. This is what they're doing.
But now, Charlie, I think it's very important that Carlo Ancelotti decided to go to Everton, partly because they had some money, but also because and this is really important for people to understand who have come to the sport this century. If you go back to when the Premier League started in 1992, there was a big 5, and Everton were one of the big 5. It was Everton, Liverpool, Arsenal, Tottenham and Manchester United. They were the big 5. And Everton have fallen out of it, and they have gone down and down and down.
And people don't even realize they were part of that big 5, Neil. I got to tell you this.
Arsenal have got to be looking at what happened to Everton, and they've got to be flipping worried.
I agree with you. I agree. And the question is, this is going to take, we've said here, and God knows we might be wrong. We've said here it'll take 3 years at least. I said, you said
3
more.
Brilliant years.
Yeah, okay. But I think you're right in a sense where let's fix the defense 1 year. We got some good midfielders. Let's figure out how we fix the front and the back, and let's start moving this forward. But it takes a real concrete planned.
Yeah.
I think that, you look at my club in AC Milan, and it is the epitome of no planning. Okay? It's just throwing stuff at the wall.
And that's what Arsenal's been for the last 5 years.
I look at Man City, there was a plan. Took them a while to get it right. I look at Liverpool, there was a plan. Took them a while to get it right, right? The beauty that Man City and Liverpool have is they have money, okay? And they're in a league that generates twice the money as anybody else, 4 times in some cases, right? So, but going into this, I mean, what the NFL shows you, and Mr. Kroenke's an NFL owner. What Mr. Ross, my boss and owner and our friend, who owns the Miami Dolphins, always says it's an equal league, because whoever does best with what they have, and they all have essentially the same menu, if you will, or the same money to buy things at the restaurant, that's who rises to the top. Now, there's certain things they put in place to help the poorer guys in a sense of job they're doing, right? They give them the first round pick when they do poorly, blah, blah, blah. You do all that stuff. At the end of the day, there are some serial winners. New England Patriots, you know what I mean? They're serial winners. And you say to yourself, you look at it, you go, this is bizarre. How is it possible?
But Charlie, if those serial winners traded their best players every year, they'd stop being serial winners.
No, but that's not true, though, in the NFL. Because I'm going to tell you something that's very important.
Different, Neil.
You only spend money, your cap money, whatever it is, $175 million.
I'm saying,
hang on a second, on 8 to 10 players. And the hardest thing to do once you win a Super Bowl is to hold on to those 8 or 10 players.
Yeah,
it's a completely different world. So what you have in the New England Patriots, and I'm a Giants fan, so I'm not a Patriots fan, so I'm not tooting their horn, and we're the only team that ever beats them. So, 2 Super Bowls, 2 for 2, that's all you could say. But the issue is that they actually, will trade away a big player and get another player, get a veteran player that people think is finished, but he fits in perfectly. They have a way, and a lot of, I got to say this. You see clubs like Real Madrid, they're doing it. They do it. They get rid of a player, they're going to get another player in. Now, they're blessed. They have the money. They can do what they want to do. But so does Arsenal. They just have to have a plan as to what they want. Are they going to keep Pepe? Are they going to keep Lacazette? Are they going to keep Aubameyang? Are they going to keep Leno? I mean, I can go on and on with these decisions they have to make. Ozil, at this point, send him off somewhere. Say somebody will pick up a third of his contract. At least you're saving a little bit of money. You don't have this embarrassment walking around the building every day, reminding you of your failures.
But Charlie, totally. With this, just on this management side, and the structure of clubs that we're talking about, we had a Miami Dolphins club here run by Joe Robbie when Don Shula was the great coach, and was stupefyingly magnificent. 2 Super Bowls, 5 AFC championships, 11 AFC East champions, perennial playoff team, the unbeaten team. And under him and under that ownership, there was a synchronization that they've never, ever been able to reproduce.
Correct.
They've never been. We've had some good ones. Jimmy Johnson came and got them to the playoffs. But after that, Mr. Ross's Miami Dolphins have been in a tailspin, not because of the ownership. And he built a magnificent new stadium, and it's fantastic. Now they've got a young man that they've entrusted in Brian Flores, and they are planning systematically for that rejuvenation, for that success. My point is
but you said it perfectly, Ray. Just to put a fine point on it, they decided it wasn't working, what they were doing.
Right.
So they're now, as you said, they have a plan. They have decided this is what we're going to do. In sports, you never know, guy get hurt, this and that. But they now set out with this plan to change everything, and it looks like they're on the right path.
Exactly, a complete reset, and it's approaching when you get a great club, the likes of the Miami Dolphins, and you get a great club, the likes of Arsenal Football Club. When it is so it's so fractured now. It seems to me, Neil, beyond any of the top football club institutions that you think of in England, Arsenal look as if they're in worse dire straits than anybody on every level. The whole mechanism of the club, the involvement with one another, the lack of the plan of which way they're going. And I don't care who they bring in as a head coach, it'll be papering over everything.
Neil, final word from you?
It needs a long-term plan, and it needs a manager and a director of football, sporting director, working hand in hand. And there's no evidence that that's happening at the moment. And if the future is David Luiz, the past was the best time.